My family expects me to host every holiday, but it's becoming too much for me. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for the past 5 years, I've been the one hosting every single holiday. For my family, I'm talking Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, even minor holidays like Memorial Day. If it's a chance for the family to gather, it's at my place. It wasn't always my job, but when my grandma passed, the role sort of fell to me. She hosted for over 30 years, and I guess everyone just expected me to pick up where she left off. See, I live alone in a house with a big living room and a dining area that's perfect for hosting. It's nothing fancy, but it's got enough space for everyone. My older brother, he's 35, lives nearby in a similar sized place, but it's never been on the table for him to take over. It's always just been a given that I'd host. He has a wife and 2 young kids, and whenever the idea of hosting comes up, he just brushes it off, saying how his place is too chaotic for a big gathering. Over the years, the family has gotten bigger. There are cousins with their own kids, aunts and uncles, some of them getting older. A typical holiday means about 20 people in my house. It's loud, there are kids running around, and everyone's got their own expectations. They like the way I cook, how I set up the decorations, and how I make everything feel just like Grandma used to. I try to keep up with it all, bought new tablecloths, different lights for Christmas, and even those fancy serving dishes that I never use outside of these events. But hey, race to the costs keep adding up between the food, drinks, decorations, and little extras to keep the kids entertained. It's not cheap, and I'm the one paying for it all. Last year, I did the math, and I realized that I spent enough to cover a decent vacation for myself. Something I haven't done in years because every extra penny seems to go into these gatherings. Around this time last year, I finally got the courage to ask my family for a bit of help. Nothing crazy, just suggested that maybe everyone could chip in a little for the food or bring a side dish. I brought it up after dinner one night, thinking it would be a casual conversation. Instead, the room went dead silent. Everyone just stared at me like I'd broken some unspoken rule. My mom quickly changed the subject. My brother made a joke about me being Mr. Moneybags, and that was it. Next thing I knew, I was still footing the bill while they brought store-bought desserts and called it a contribution. The last Thanksgiving was kind of my breaking point. The whole family was overeating and drinking and catching up while I was running around, making sure the turkey didn't burn and the drinks stayed filled. The dishwasher decided to quit halfway through the night, and by the time everyone left, I was stuck hand-washing dishes until nearly 2 a.m. Meanwhile, my family left early, saying how tired they were without a second thought to the mess they left behind. I think that's when it hit me how little time I actually get to enjoy these holidays myself. For my family, it's a chance to relax, to sit back and enjoy a home-cooked meal in a familiar place. But for me, it's become a full-time job. I wake up at the crack of dawn to start prepping, and by the time I'm finished cleaning up, it's like the day just vanished. And the pressure isn't just about the time and money, it's about the expectations. Every time I hint that maybe I won't host the next one, my mom just brushes it off with comments like, "But you're so good at it or it wouldn't be the same anywhere else." I even tried to bring it up gently at Christmas last year, saying something like maybe it's time to pass the torch. My mom just looked at me and said, "Well, where else would we go?" My brother, of course, didn't jump in to offer his place. He just nodded along like he didn't have a stake in it. I couldn't help but feel a bit resentful. It's not like he doesn't have the space or the means to help out. He just doesn't want to hassle. And meanwhile, I'm left juggling credit card debt because I keep trying to make each holiday special. I've been putting off having a serious talk with them, mostly because I'm worried about how they'll react. My parents are very traditional, and I know they'd be disappointed if I stop hosting. They'd see it as me turning my back on the family legacy. But it's not just about the money or the work anymore. It's the fact that I feel taken for granted. For years, Eve put up with it, telling myself that it's worth it to keep the family together. But lately I'm starting to wonder if it's really worth the toll it's taking on me. I used to love the holidays, but now I just dread them. I dread the planning, the cooking, the cleaning, and the feeling of being overlooked. It's not a good place to be, and I know that if I don't make a change soon, I'm going to end up resenting my family even more. So here I am, debating how to break the news to them that I need a break. I know it's going to cause drama. My family doesn't handle change well, but for the first time, I feel like I need to put myself first, even if it means rocking the boat. I just hope they understand, or at least try to before it's too late. So I decided to rip off the Band-Aid. I invited my parents and my brother over for brunch at my place. Figured it would be easier to explain everything in person without distractions. I went all out with the food, eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, the whole 9 yards. The mood was light when they arrived. My dad started talking about his golf game. My mom was asking about my neighbor's new dog, and my brother was busy scrolling through his phone while his kids played in the corner. It felt like a typical Sunday morning. Once everyone had eaten, I figured it was as good a time as any. I cleared my throat and told them that I needed to talk about the holidays this year. As soon as I brought it up, my mom's smile faded and my brother stopped scrolling. My dad kept eating, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. I went straight into it, explaining that hosting was getting to be too much for me. I talked about the costs, how I've been putting everything on my credit card, and how I haven't really been able to enjoy the holidays myself. For a few seconds, there was just silence. My dad finally broke it, waving his hand like he was brushing away a fly. He said something about how it wasn't a big deal and that the family could pitch in a little more this year, but he didn't really seem to get it. I tried to explain that it wasn't just the money, it was the time and effort too. I reminded them about the dishwasher breaking last Thanksgiving, how I'd been stuck doing dishes while everyone else was relaxing. I could see my mom starting to frown, her face getting that pinched look she always gets when she doesn't like what she's hearing. My mom jumped in, talking about how my grandmother had hosted every year without ever complaining, how it kept the family close. She brought up memories of my grandma's old house, how it had always felt like home, and how she thought I'd been doing a great job continuing that tradition. That afternoon, the guests started to arrive, all cheerful and excited, as if it was just another year where they'd celebrate at my expense. My parents were the first to show up. As my mom walked in, she looked around and said, "Strange, you didn't decorate." My dad, oblivious to the tension in the air, went straight to the couch as he always did. Shortly after, my brother arrived with his wife and kids, complaining about the traffic, then dumped their coats on the armchair without a second thought. As everyone settled in, they began asking about dinner. I casually told them things would be different this year, and I hadn't prepared the usual feast. My mom's smile disappeared instantly. "What do you mean? You always cook for Thanksgiving," she exclaimed. I calmly responded, "This year, it's up to you guys. If you want to eat, you'll need to order takeout or bring something." For a moment, there was an awkward silence. Everyone stared at me, expecting me to say I was joking. I wasn't. My brother chuckled, thinking I was pulling a prank. But when he realized I was serious, his expression turned sour. "You gotta be kidding me. We brought the kids all the way here, and you didn't even cook a turkey?" I shrugged. "I told you during brunch that this was getting to be too much for me, but it seems like no one took it seriously." The tension grew thicker. My mom, trying to keep her composure, responded in a passive-aggressive tone. "This isn't how you treat your family. Your grandmother never let us go hungry." I sighed, replying firmly, "My grandmother didn't do this alone for 30 years. Everyone helped, even just a little. None of you have ever bothered to pitch in." My brother folded his arms and sneered. "Oh, here we go. Cue the drama." His wife shook her head in annoyance and muttered something under her breath. Meanwhile, the kids started whining about being hungry, and my sister-in-law snapped, "This is ridiculous. The kids were looking forward to this for weeks." I looked her in the eye and calmly said, "And I've been waiting for help for years." The response was immediate. My dad, visibly irritated, muttered, "If I knew you were going to pull this stunt, I'd have gone to play golf." My mom's face turned red with anger, and she started lecturing me about how I was ruining the family tradition. But this time, I didn't hold back. "You only care about this tradition because you don't have to do the work. I've spent more than I can afford to keep this going, and the only thing I asked for was a little help." What did I get? Silence, jokes, and more bills. At that point, my brother's wife, unable to hide her frustration, grabbed the kids and said, "Let's go. This is a waste of time." My brother, following her lead, got up and gave me a disdainful look. "Good luck with Christmas," he said sarcastically before slamming the door behind him. With them gone, only my parents remained. My mom stared at me, as if she couldn't believe her son would break the family's expectations like this. "This is betrayal," she whispered. I took a deep breath and replied, "No, Mom. Betrayal is making me carry a burden that should have been shared by everyone." My dad, clearly out of patience, added, "If you don't want to be part of this family, just say so." His words stung more than I expected, but I knew I had to stand my ground. It's not that I don't want to be part of the family. It's that, for once, I want to take care of myself. They stood up and left, leaving the door wide open behind them, as if expecting me to run after them. I didn't. I simply closed the door, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts, just silence. I knew they were waiting for me to apologize, to backtrack, and take on the hosting role again. But this time I wasn't going to give in. Christmas came and went, and for the first time in years, I had no obligations. I spent the holiday alone, with a simple dinner and a marathon of movies. No screaming children, no dishes to wash, no accumulating debt. Just peace. A few months later, I heard that my brother tried to host Easter at his place. It didn't go as planned. Nobody showed up prepared, and without enough food, guests left early, grumbling. He learned the hard way what it felt like to shoulder everything alone. And of course, my mom blamed me for the decline of the family, as if it was all my fault. Still, I stood my ground. I made it clear that if they wanted to keep the tradition alive, they'd have to do it without me. It wasn't my problem anymore. I had finally chosen to live for myself, and despite their anger, I never felt freer. The irony? With the money I saved, I finally took that vacation I'd been postponing for years. As I watched the sunset on a distant beach, without a single worry in the world, I realized the greatest gift I'd given myself was freedom. Months after breaking free from the family tradition, the peace I found was priceless. No more kids screaming, no more stress from hosting parties for an ungrateful crowd, and most importantly, no more financial pressure. I finally had the space to breathe. I began focusing on myself. I got back into old hobbies, started going to the gym, and even took a cooking class, but this time just for me. Meanwhile, things weren't going so smoothly for my family. Without the gatherings at my house, everything fell apart. My brother tried to host events to keep up appearances, but nothing went as planned. During Easter, guests showed up unprepared, and the food ran out early. They left complaining about the lack of organization. Christmas was even worse. He planned a last-minute barbecue in his garage, but only half the family showed up, and those who did kept whispering about how much better things had been when I was in charge. My mom was furious with my brother, and the tension between them escalated. She started calling him lazy and selfish, ironically ignoring the fact that she had treated me the same way for years. My dad, fed up with the chaos, spent more time at the golf course, leaving my mom to stew in her frustration. The cherished family atmosphere they clung to so desperately began to unravel. I stayed far removed from the drama. I didn't respond to my mom's passive-aggressive messages or my brother's attempts to pin the blame on me for abandoning the family. I simply moved on. With no holiday stress weighing me down, I started traveling more. The money that once went toward extravagant dinners now funded experiences I'd always dreamed of. I spent a month in Europe, exploring cities I had always wanted to visit, meeting new people along the way. At one point, I heard through a cousin that my mom had tried to stage a family intervention to bring me back. They even dragged in a distant uncle to persuade me to resume hosting. I found out about this while sitting on a beach, sipping a cold drink as the sun set over the ocean. The thought of trading my newfound peace for the chaos I had left behind seemed so absurd that I laughed out loud. They never understood that it wasn't just about a party. It was about respect, something they had never given me. Gradually, the family dynamic shifted for good. My mom and brother stopped speaking for a while, each blaming the other for the collapse of the family traditions. My brother's wife eventually filed for divorce, leaving him with 2 young kids to raise on his own. Suddenly, he was juggling responsibilities he had once dumped on me, and no one showed up to help him. My dad, who always preferred to avoid conflict rather than solve it, drifted even further away, only deepening the resentment between them. My mom occasionally tried to reconnect with me, but every conversation ended the same way. "Why can't you at least host Christmas for us?" Every time she brought it up, I smiled and said, "I hosted enough. It's your turn now." It became clear that I wasn't coming back, and they resented me for it. They kept trying to pin the family's problems on me, but it no longer affected me. I had found something I'd never had in all those years: freedom. I no longer had anything to prove, and the guilt they tried to push on me had no power. There were no more debts from holiday extravagance, no more feeling used by people who didn't truly care about me. The last time I saw my family was at a distant cousin's wedding. They were there, scattered in small groups, avoiding each other. My brother looked exhausted, my mom bitter and worn out. When they saw me, they avoided eye contact. No words were necessary. We all knew I was at peace while they remained trapped in the same toxic cycle. In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Sometimes putting yourself first is seen as selfish, but for me, it was survival. Learning to say no was the most valuable lesson I took from this experience, and I had no room left in my life for guilt or regret. Nowadays, I spend my holidays in simple, meaningful ways, sometimes traveling, sometimes just enjoying a quiet day at home with a good book. The only tradition I maintain is the one where I take care of myself. And honestly, that's the only tradition that matters. Have they learned anything from all this? I don't know. And frankly, I don't care. After years of sacrificing myself for others, I've finally found peace. And that's a victory no one can take away from me.